Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Brown Perspective. It's been a while since Eduardo and I had a chance to record a podcast. So today we'd like to take some time and do a quick recap to talk a bit about the stuff that we've been doing in between. I know it's been a few weeks. I have
It
Eduardo
has
here
been.
with me.
How are you?
Pretty good. I know you've been doing a lot of traveling.
Yes, it has been. It's been almost travel physically and also back in time.
Yeah, and just to put it out there, we try to do a podcast or a recording, but once a week. But every now and then, if things come up, then there might be a few weeks that go in between. But we always try to stay in touch, and if our schedule's available, then we definitely try to get together to do these recordings. And so the month of May is always a busy one. You got a lot of activity going on, and then around the time that the reunion comes up, every 5 or 10 reunions come up every 5 or 10 years, and it just so happened that this year is the 15-year reunion
15th.
now
Yes,
since
that's
we
right.
graduated from Brown University. So that
The quinceañera.
yeah, that was thrown into your agenda for May, among other things that you have. Why don't you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, I mean, those few days were interesting. I think that the nice thing for me is going back to school is also going back home. So it's and very much a way of reconnecting with my family, with my home, my friends from home, and also connecting with my experience at Brown. And I think it's an interesting time because commencement, because that's how we usually the exercises that week are called because it's the beginning of your new life, right? The commencement of your new life. But when it comes to reunion, it's also reconnecting with your friends, reconnecting with your thoughts and experiences. And I think for me, it was fascinating to think about, 15 years since graduating, 19 years since setting foot at Brown. And so all of these memories, right, of how you and I met each other, of all the relationships that we have there, of all the different things that we experience, being able to look both at how I've changed as a person, but certain things remain the same. The people who have come in and out of my life, and all of those things. So it was definitely a fascinating exercise.
Yeah, I wanted
It's
to
an
ask
exercise for
you.
me.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about the 15 years in particular because I didn't make it this time around, but I was there with
Yeah,
you
and that
for
was a
the
that was a big difference this time around because you and I have gone through all of the reunions together since we graduated.
yeah 5 year reunion. 5 year reunion was a lot of fun, and then the 10 year reunion as well. Some stuff changed in between. I think we can talk a bit about that, and then there was the 15 year reunion. But in this case, it was just travel was a little bit tougher for me, especially with the baby.
Hmm.
It's always a challenge. I would have loved to have gone, but why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what your if anything, what you notice about not necessarily Brown itself. We can talk a little bit about that, but also what you notice about yourself
Hmm.
now that you're older, how you might may analyze things, how you may analyze the culture, perceive it, the difference in strata that you come into at Brown University, where you have people that come from very modest backgrounds, and then you have people that are super wealthy that
Hmm.
come from opulence. So how did you do you remember how you interpreted that after coming back 5 years, 10 years versus now? Was there a significant difference?
Yes and no. I think it's interesting because I felt that what Brown did was level the playing field for me. So again, you and I were able to be in a university with people who come from wealth, privilege, money, from all backgrounds, races, and all those things. So in some ways, the fact that we graduated from Brown, and then now we have successful careers is indicative. Okay, we were able to make it. We proved ourselves in a way, but at the same time, then you still have people there who are uh, way more advanced in their careers, right? So there's people who are working for Hollywood, for working for startups and all these things. And again, it's not about comparing yourself to others, but it definitely it gives you this perspective of okay, like Brown helped get into Brown was great because they it was a platform for me not only to enter this network, but then to be able to take that education and go somewhere. But there was a fascinating moment during Campus Dance, and for those of you who are not familiar, Campus Dance is basically the biggest party of the weekend. They close the main green. The main green is the area where we have the oldest administrative building, right? The building where George Washington came to visit because it was used as a hospital during the Revolutionary War. And then you also have the lower campus, which actually is now named after Ruth Simmons, who is who was the first African American president of an Ivy League institution. So thank you, Romero, for pulling up the the um, the map, and that's Fawn's house. And actually, and this could be part of another conversation, but actually in Fawn's house, those steps right in front of that building, they used to auction slaves. And one of the things that Ruth Simmons did was help the institution come to terms with its role, Rhode Island's role in the slave trade. But in any case, so obviously a lot of history, a lot of fun, and if you can pull up a picture of Campus Dance so people can see how nice it looks, like they have paper lanterns, they have a big band, so playing some classic old time swing music, and then the lower campus is where they have um, the younger classes, and they have a rock band. So that's the lower campus, and that's where the younger folks tend to be. Their bar is there, all those things. So, anyways, I was standing there wanting to go to the restroom after a couple of drinks, and I realized that I'm standing behind these folks are that we have, other than the fact that we went to Brown, we had nothing in common, right? It was just kind of this trippy feeling of that we all went to the same institution, but obviously you guys are still the elite of the elite, right? You're doing all these things. And so I guess just kind of the I don't know if it's the imposter syndrome or of dealing with all of that stuff that I remember dealing
So,
with
yeah,
when I first came to
some
Brown.
some insecurity trickles up.
Yes.
Some, yeah, it triggers something. And what I wanted to also mention was that earlier when you said that going to Brown allowed us to even the level playing field a bit by giving us the opportunity to become professionals. It's not like you're not saying that all of a sudden we became wealthy. It just means that we managed to make it to some level in the middle class where there is a profession, there's some job security, and enough money to live a somewhat normal life where maybe you can buy a house, maybe you can, depending on which market it is. Like San Francisco is really expensive, LA is really expensive, so you have to save for a long time. But
Hmm.
that's what you mean by saying that the level field got evened out a little bit because of where we came from. But in comparison to some of these other people that go to these gatherings, we're still pretty average in terms of like the resources, because some of these people, I mean, they come from wealth.
Yeah.
It'd be amazing if it was people that came from our similar background and all of a sudden they catapulted themselves to being able to fly around in private jets and doing things like that. But I think a lot of the people that are here come from generational wealth.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think, and I think maybe one or two people in our class have done that. Maybe those who went to work for Wall Street or a startup, or who became doctors and things like that. But I think what you were saying, and then the other piece is just reminding me of, as a poor Latino student at Brown, you had kind of a number of paths to decide, right? So you focus on your studies and you were really focused on what you needed to do, or you got active in on campus, whether it was through the cultural group Mezcla, showcasing your culture, or whether it was student activism, and also feeling that oftentimes it fell on the poorest uh, least prepared people to be on campus to also do the type of activism that helped the school get to where it needed to get, right? So I know that we're also celebrating the 50th um, anniversary of the walkout, or it was 40th or something. I can't remember the exact. Oh no, it was the 50th of the open curriculum, I believe it is. And again, this was something that was revolutionary back in those times, but it was very tied to the activism and everything that was going on in the United States. I think back in 1968, was it? Or
Yeah.
was it way before that?
Yeah, but
But
yeah,
in any
that was.
case,
Go ahead.
but also realizing that it was that experience that I know that has informed that provided me a lot of the skills and a lot of the opportunities that allowed me to remain active with Brown and also to figure out how at the advocacy world works. So it's interesting, and then to see what the that some things have changed and some things have definitely stayed the same as it relates to the Latinx experience at the university.
Yeah, and one of the things that I try to make sure that we do in our conversations is that we acknowledge this, despite the experience that you were commenting on, where it feels like it's the people that come from disadvantaged backgrounds that are the ones that are trying to push for change. That even though it feels that way, that there's
Hmm.
still allies that we have from other communities,
True.
including the white American community, because it might be a pocket of them, but they're very dedicated and they're very committed. I think in these terms they would be referred to as woke individuals, people that
Hmm.
acknowledge that there are some inherent indifferences in the system, and they try to do something about it. And it's a small group of them, but they do exist, and we just want to acknowledge them. I think for the
Yeah.
rest of the people, what you touched on makes a lot of sense, because they live in their own world, they live in a bubble, and a lot of the problems that would affect us, they're invisible to them. So through ignorance of our experience, it's hard to say. It's hard to say if they've been if somebody has not necessarily confronted them, but if someone has brought them around to understanding those experiences. And at that point, if they have chosen to say, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I don't care, or
Hmm.
yeah, I hear what you're saying, I'm going to try to do something, but ultimately they get lost again in their day-to-day activities, and they don't become as committed to trying to bring about that change because it doesn't affect them. So it has to affect somebody at some level, even emotionally or somewhere, for you to become dedicated to a cause. And so, for a number of reasons, these people, they seem to be detached from that. And so, yeah, I get what you're saying with having. I think you talked on the events that used to be organized at Brown about with Mezcla and putting together performances to try to bring about diversity to the campus. Right, that was one example
Yeah.
of those.
No, and thank you for highlighting that, because I think the majority of the people who attend Brown are people who really want to change the world, and I think that that's one of the things that differentiates people who attend the Brown, and I think that they tend to be down to earth, and even the people that I reconnected with um, from our class, people who are doing great work, people who are doctors, nurses, people who are working for foundations, people who are lawyers fighting some of the injustices in the legal system around housing, some folks who are working for government,
Hmm.
work people who are working for the private sector, but all of them are really nice people. Yes, some of them are aware of their privileges, of their biases, but overall, it's just like genuinely nice people who care, who are trying to do their part to make an impact in the world and to make it a better place. And I think that, acknowledging that going to an institution like Brown is a privilege unto itself, right? And being able to attend and being able to graduate, having the documentation, right? The other piece that was um, heartwarming for me was that there was a celebration of the graduating seniors They call it the Unity Celebration, and this is where the African American group, the Latino, Asian American, TB Gala, which is the brown, gay, lesbian alumni associations, and they all get together. And there was this acknowledgement of DACA students, right? So the president of the university was there acknowledging the work that the university has done to better support first generation students, first
Hmm.
gen
Hmm.
students, which again, it was the kind of students that you and I were, and there was students who helped bubble up the importance of having more systematic supports for them in order to be successful at the university. So it was great to see that even if you understand that there's still a lot more that the university can do in terms of funding, resources, that there's an acknowledgement of the importance of having all of the different diversities of experiences there, including people who are Latino and undocumented, and also non-Latino, because there's a lot of non-Latinos who are undocumented students as well.
Yeah, the university has always had a it always leans on the progressive side. Even back
Yes.
then when we were there, I remember the parties that they used to have for the LGBT community,
Hmm.
and even back then it was pretty forward thinking in terms of its inclusion and inclusion of other groups like the gay and the lesbian people and queer and so forth. I forget. I never went to one of those parties, but it was a huge thing. And I don't remember if there were any groups on campus, more conservative groups that would protest those type of parties. But I don't remember it ever being a big deal, even if there were some small groups that weren't happy with those. Do
Hmm.
you? Maybe I'm not doing such a good job of explaining the parties, but can you talk a little bit about some of those parties that was it the Star party? Remember that one?
Yeah, star F.
Yeah.
You can imagine what the F stands for. But yeah, and I think I only went once, and part of it was just because there's always something going on in the weekends, and you're also trying to study. I was working at the time too, so as a student who had work study, I also had to get my money to pay my portion of my education. But anyways, I think it was a type of environment, and again, it's that type of space where for the LGBT plus community is important, right? Because it's an important acknowledgement of we're here, we're not going anywhere, we're an important part of the campus experience. We want to create a safe space for our community to have a good time and to party with their friends. But obviously, like so many other things, it kind of just became this debauchery of people just drinking, getting drunk, of dressing scandalously, which is sometimes what I feel is happening with the Pride celebrations that I know are happening this month as part of Pride Month.
Hmm.
But in any case, I think the
But
intent of that space is an important one.
yeah, but I think that's part of that's the whole point of that weekend party, isn't it? That
Hmm.
they get to act wild and do those things because that's what everybody else does anyway. So if there's debauchery, if they're hooking up, if they're getting drunk and doing all those things, well, that's what every single frat party does.
But
And
that's the thing. But I feel like they do it, but then you have the frat folks who come over and kind of take their celebration to. It's almost like an appropriation of your party, right? It's like the Harambe House parties, right? Those were some of the best parties on campus because it was great music. It was mostly people of color just having a good time, and it was really sweaty and hot in that room. But it was an awesome experience.
hmm.
But I also felt like it was a safe space for people of color who like hip hop, who like dancing, to just have a good time with each other.
Oh, but you're suggesting that you preferred it to just be people of color, that
No, just be. I think is I think that
predominantly people of color.
no, I think part of it is like if you go to a party like that, it's also about respecting I mean, it's about enjoying the moment. But I guess I had issues with the Star F celebration because I felt like people use it as an excuse to just go crazy, and so in some ways it makes the community the community look bad, right? So it's like,
But I guess, but see, this is where I'm thinking that is that a bias that we have towards already labeling people that don't conform to your normal male female role? Are we judging them based on misconceptions or on stereotypes that we have? Because that, like I said, that isn't that every single frat party on campus just getting wild like that and all the stuff that they do. I mean, how was Star F any different? I know people dressed up and I know they got crazy and they got drunk, but,
yeah,
but beyond, I mean, that's that again. That's like that sounds like a frat party to me. I remember
yeah,
seeing the parties and I remember it was extravagant because people really went out and they dressed up, and a lot of them like scantily clad, is like wearing nothing
yeah,
at all, almost just like a something even see through, right? So something very
yeah.
thin and diaphanous, and so but beyond that, what else was so crazy about those parties to you?
Well, I guess they were meant to be provocative. So I think they were provocative, but feeling that people from outside of that community making them taking them to the next level. And then again, you're right. Maybe it's my own bias, my own unfamiliarity with the party scene. And I know my perspective on on gay parties is that they tend to be wild, right? They tend to have a good time. They have good music, good drinks, all those things. So I think that's sort of the stereotype
Mm-hmm.
that you see out there in the or that I've seen, right? And when I was in Washington D.C., I went to a couple of gay clubs, and for me that was an interesting experience because obviously it's a space as a straight Latino male is a space that I wasn't accustomed to going to, and again it was just a normal gay people at a party, and to your point, just in the same way that I used to go to bars and check out who's there and have a drink, get drunk with my friends. So it was the same thing. The drinks are a little stronger.
Yeah.
And I think that's another reason why people like to go to gay bars. um or at least that I wanted to go to a gay bar, particularly at that time, because you want to maximize your budget when it comes to drinking. But I felt that it was still a space that it was created for them by them where they could be comfortable versus a bunch of straight people coming in and just going buck wild and taking advantage of an excuse to party. So I guess that's where
Yeah, but
my concern comes in.
yeah, but I think that I wanted to touch on that with the Harambe party as well. That it's really hard to have one without the other, because if they're organizing a party that they
Hmm.
say that they want to, because they want to have their space, well, that's great. But I don't think they can exclude other people. I mean,
No, and I'm not saying not
I
to
guess
exclude it.
that's what I'm saying. Like you could, but then you know where that leads if you try to do that. So they want to say we're gonna have a party, and we're gonna allow other people to come in. But I think what you're saying is that the number of outsiders that came in and exploited that and went
Yeah.
crazy just for the sake of going crazy overshadowed what the small community really wanted to do. I
Well,
mean,
and I guess if we talk about parties, we can't leave out the Machado parties, right? And I know part of the reason these parties were popular because in some ways, if I remember correctly, they also serve as a fundraiser, right? Like some of them you had to pay an entry fee in order to get there, and I think is a way that, but the what was the house that I just said? The
Machado
Machado
House,
House,
yeah.
which that space I feel like, yeah, it was mostly Latino, but I also felt there were a lot of international students, and rightfully so, right? Because I
Hmm.
think there were a lot of students, but I know the international students had their own party too, which it was mostly for the wealthy foreign exchange students and
Hmm.
and and, and their friends. So that's the thing. So there were different scenes, and understanding that with Star F. they were trying to make sure they sold tickets and got, and that through the part of it is also like it's a popularity contest, right? Like which
Hmm.
group, which community can throw the best parties, or really do a signature activity that helps them connect with themselves, but also let the broader community know a little bit about who they are and how they like to have a good time.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't remember getting the feeling that you got about it being used as an excuse by others, or I didn't see it that way. But I do remember that a lot of people not from that community would also start dressing up in extravagant
Mm.
fashion, like a lot of guys dressing up as drag,
Yeah.
or would so I just saw it as like they're just having fun. Maybe some of them are even closeted individuals that this is their one opportunity to get out
Hmm.
there and feel like themselves without, and then the next day they can go back into the closet. Um, I never went to any of those parties because honestly, I saw a whole bunch of people just acting stupid, and I was like, I don't. I don't actually. I don't think I had a friend that invited me to begin with. But if I was invited, it wasn't my thing. But my
Yeah.
criticism of the party is that that's just not my thing. The way that they were celebrating. But hey, if that's how they did it, then
Yeah.
more power to them. Because again, to me, it was just a ton of young people looking for an excuse to be themselves, to get drunk, and to act crazy. And it's very similar to a lot of other parties, especially those frat
Hmm.
parties that I used to go to. And then the Machado party, I went to one of those. I do remember that room. It was really hot. I think the Machado party houses they weren't as attractive to me either uh because a lot of what went on there was like dancing, like really good dancing, and dancing
Hmm.
to Caribbean music, to salsa, to merengue. And I just, being Mexican from the West Coast, I'm just not, at least back then, I wasn't as comfortable dancing that music because I didn't really know how to dance the music.
It was a mezcla rehearsal party.
It was a mix we heard exactly. So you weren't gonna hear any band. I mean, you maybe like one song just to like, hey,
Un rinconcito en el
let's just
cielo.
acknowledge the group of Mexicans that we have here. Let's play them one song, and then, but then the rest of it was all,
It was usually La Chona, right?
yeah. And I don't know. The thing with salsa and merengue is that it, when I got to Brown, I hadn't really been exposed to that type of music, so I could dance it, I could follow the rhythm, but it's very basic. And when you're dancing with a whole bunch of people that are international, that are Latinos, these guys start off as almost at pro level. There's no
Hmm.
beginner level. There's intermediate, and then there's like amazing. And so a lot of the people that came from the Dominican Republic, from Puerto Rico, from New York, from Cuba, and then you guys, the Colombian guys,
Colombia.
you could dance at a different level. So when I used to go there, I used to be like, well, I could try to dance, but I'm pretty basic. So then that gets intimidating. So I would just kind of hang out on the with small groups of people that were just kind of hanging out, not having as much fun as you guys were. I could
Yeah.
I could have at any time invested more time to figure out how to dance better, but it's one of those things where at the moment when I used to be at those parties, I used to be like, man, I need to invest in teaching myself how to dance salsa and how to dance merengue so I could like be out there and be really comfortable, so that you don't feel awkward or shy about asking a girl out to dance because you know that she's gonna expect you to be a really good dancer. So I
Exactly.
used to have those conversations while I was at the party and just having a drink or two. But then the next day I would forget and I just wouldn't care enough. So I guess ultimately that's what it comes down to. I would care for a minute, but then I wouldn't care enough the next day to really follow through on learning. But either way, I didn't, for different reasons, I didn't really go to either of those two parties.
Yeah, and it's funny because for me, Brown was definitely the first time I was introduced to the party where you're just standing around and talking, right? That
Mm-hmm.
was like a shocker for me. Because for me, a party means dancing, music, a good time. So that was the first time, like, I remember going to some parties, house parties, and then some frat parties. But I think mostly the house parties where, the music was kind of low. They had plenty of drinks, but it was definitely all just about talking or playing playing drinking games, and that was kind of cultural shock for me. I was like, okay, like I thought we were gonna be at a party. Like, why are we just sitting or standing and talking? How is this? How is this fun? And obviously, then it kind of grows on you, and then prepares you for the reception life that's that comes when you start working.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna. What was I gonna say? The um, I lost my thought about. I was gonna say something about those parties, also about the dancing. Oh, so usually, isn't it just dancing itself? I mean, maybe I'm too much of like living in my own head and trying and analyzing everything around me and noticing everything. But even just dancing itself, if I didn't have like a drink or two back then, or maybe even now, it just doesn't. There's some awkwardness to it that I've always felt. Maybe because I can't completely let go, because you're the type of person that you get on the dance floor and you get immersed into the dancing, and
Hmm.
I can never do that when I'm dancing. I There's always something about it that feels weird. Like, what am
Hmm.
I doing? Or what is this? Like, don't get me wrong, I enjoy the music and I enjoy the
Yeah.
rhythm and I enjoy dancing to it, but there's always that hint of awkwardness. Is like, what the hell are we doing? It's like we're all
Yeah.
just moving to, and then I always pictured, I was like, what if we were just all doing this but without any music? It feels even more awkward.
Yeah.
I would usually I
Which
would
people
usually
do,
I would
kind of like
usually
the
get that.
silent parties, right?
What's
When
up?
when you see people with their headphones and you see them dancing, but you don't hear music yourself, there's that disconnect.
Yeah, and usually the like, let's say I went to a party and there was a lot of dancing and I was like really let go of myself and having a great time. The next day when I would wake up, the first thought that always comes into my head is I always picture myself the day before and I always picture myself dancing, but I don't hear the music in my head. I just see myself dancing. And I'm like, what the hell was I doing? That's so primitive. What is this dancing thing, right? It just I get it, but there's like that element of awkwardness that always gets me. I don't know if
There
you.
is, there is, and I mean, and I think part of it, because dancing and music, it means like, do you? A lot of it is like, what tribe are you, or what music, what thing have you been exposed to? Because it signifies, okay, this is the type of music that you've danced to, or the type of music that you grew up with, or that friends taught you how to dance, or that your parents taught you how to dance. So for me, like, I love dancing, as you mentioned, and so I'm a good dancer, but I also realized that I'm not like a technical dancer, right? So I remember at those parties, and particularly with Mezcla, and I know there were individuals somewhat like you, who started out as not being good dancers, but then really got into it, and then they just became these amazing salsa dancers. And I know we have a friend that we love dearly, who always goes out dancing, who she loves to dance, and became a really amazing like salsa dancer.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me, dancing is about having a good time, and yes, about being able to do some of the moves, some vueltas, all those things. But then I think once it gets to all the turns and more of the like ballroom type of style of dancing, then that's kind of also I start feeling awkward, because then I feel like, oh, well, I only have three turns that I do, and
Yeah.
these people are doing like five, and they're just turning the whole damn.
It's like having three shirts to wear for the whole week.
Exactly,
By Wednesday
exactly.
you're like, damn, I gotta start over again with the shirts.
But you know how it is. It's not, it's not how many shirts you have, but how you wear them, right? And making sure they're clean, that they look good. But ultimately, for dancing, is you just have to have a good time. And I think for me is like, so growing up in the East Coast and growing up in Colombia, definitely the Caribbean music is definitely I'm closer to. And then I think because of New York influence across the region, in particular because you have people from Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, all those communities come together in New York, and then from there that music expands across the country and then across the continent. I feel that there's this just opportunity to to once you learn, and once you kind of learn the basic steps, you can start experimenting. And definitely when you have a little bit of alcohol in your system, you can let loose. But it's also just about having a good time, and doing and following and dancing to the rhythm the best you can.
Yeah, I remember that Harambe house party. It must have been the last year that I was there. And I remember going there, and again, because that wasn't really dancing. I think I was too self conscious to try to even ask somebody out because I was like, I'm just not good enough. I won't even try. Plus, it was packed too.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, like, man, like, because I was there for a bit and then I had to go outside. 'Cause there's a lot of people that would go outside to get to America because it's too hot in there. And I just remember thinking, well, if you're in there dancing, then the only thing that's keeping you there is probably the prospect that you're going to hook up with the person you're dancing with. Because why else would you put yourself through all that suffering? I know people like dancing, but that was really
Exactly.
hot. Hey,
Exactly.
I wanted to come back to the parties at Brown and the celebration. I just quickly maybe take another tangent on that as well. You mentioned LGBTQ, LGBT plus, or was it LGBTQ plus? I
Yeah.
haven't. Yeah,
LGTB. Oh man.
LG.
LGBTQ plus.
Okay, I haven't heard the plus before. I've heard LGBTQI or LGBTQ something else. It seems like this thing is constantly evolving. What's the plus
Mhm.
for?
I think
Just
plus
anyone else?
is because of, I think, bisexual, but now also including transgender.
Isn't that what the
Uh,
LGBT? Isn't that what the T's for?
oh, the T's
Lay.
for that's true. But I just remember hearing the plus and somebody explaining that it was similar to what's happening now with Latinx, that people feeling that it's a bit more inclusive of the diversity within the community. So that's one of the terms that I've used, but again, I'm not
Yeah, I'm actually
the
that's
final authority on that.
when I heard it, to me is the one that makes the most sense because then they're gonna keep adding letters to it because
Yeah, exactly.
right. So if you just say plus, that's everyone else, and if you're not happy that your letter didn't make it into the first few letters, then take it up with the lesbians, the gay, the transsexuals, and the queers because they got there first.
And I thought Q was questioning though.
Questioning is not queer.
That's what I thought.
Well, I don't know enough, so apologies if I don't know the lingo yet. I'll wait for the new release of Webster's Dictionary to define what the proper terminology is.
Yes. And and I think going back to reunion, one of the things that I'm happy to report is that the at least the student community at the graduating student community has grown drastically since we were there. So at the Latinx commencement dinner, you had about 44 students there who are graduating. So I think part of it may be a reflection of the number of Latinos who are now graduating from the institution, but also the fact that they're continuing to use that space to celebrate the accomplishment with their family. So I think that was nice to see, and the fact that now the alumni relations is the one, well, alumni relations, and they now call the Thor World Center, they call it the Brown Center for Students of Color,
Mm-hmm.
is the organizer of both all of the, I believe, all of the affinity group commencement dinners that week.
Well, it's definitely better than Third World Center, but students of color still just not necessarily in this context, but just in general, referring to everyone else, every non-white as of color. That's just something about it also that it doesn't feel right. I think eventually we'll figure out a better way to categorize each other without having like, these negative stigmas associated with them. But
But what do you think being of
um,
color is a stigma, though?
well, because it assumes that the default is that there's a default and that everybody else is outside of it, right? Like white people have color. It's not they don't. There's no default white. There's pasty white. There's reddish white. There's rednecks. There's a whole bunch of them, but they don't get categorized. So
Hmm.
when you say people of color, you're saying everybody else because the default is this implied
Oh, I see what
default,
you're saying.
and so eventually we want to get away from this things that imply that there's like a normal or a default. But anyway, Third World Center, happy that's gone. Better person of color is a little bit
Can't
better for
believe you,
now.
man. I can't believe you.
What?
Maybe because I was
Well, that's because you bought the
A,
whole. You
a
bought the
minority
whole.
peer counselor.
Because you
I
were there
did
and
a lot
you.
of work in the Third World Center.
Yeah, because you were there and you got the whole spiel behind the history of it.
I
Obviously,
drank the Kool-Aid.
if you sit somebody down for an hour and you give them the whole history of how it's an empowering term, then sure they'll come out with that interpretation. But if you just tell it to somebody, they still associate it with something like, "Damn, you guys call it Third World Center." It's like, look, man, how much time you
Ooh.
got? Do you have an hour so I can give you the whole history of it? And
Speaking of which, how you feel about Mecha getting rid of the Movimiento Estudiantil de Aztlán?
yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. That's just, I think there were some elements in its initial um in the articles of Santa Barbara. I think in the original founding, the missive or the statement of the organization, that they could easily be taken by somebody that wants to exploit the organization and label it as militant. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but um,
I think part of it was they were trying to make it more inclusive.
yeah,
And
go ahead.
yeah, but so more inclusive, and I guess a little less, I guess, controversial, but
But there's no, see, that's the thing, that's what I'm saying. There's nothing controversial about Mecha in the sense that it's no different than like Jewish Association of Students or the Indian Association of Students that get together and do stuff just because they all have some similarities. Mecha is just, at least traditionally, has been Mexican American students that get together and then they try to do community service, help each other, and then at some point, it wasn't just Mexicans; it was like Central Americans too, and then any other Latinos. So Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán, that was the original name, but it was very inclusive because it wasn't just Mexicans. But I
yeah.
don't think there was ever anything controversial about that. The only thing that I thought that one of the reasons why they might want to get away from that name would be what happened with Villaraigosa when he was running the mayor, former mayor of LA. When he was running, I think it was it going to be his first run for mayor of LA, or when he was going to run for governor. That they started poking into his past and they started saying he was part of a radical organization. I was like, what radical organization was that? And then they said Mecha. I was like, there's nothing
Mm.
radical about Mecha. But if you read the paper on which it's founded, it could be misconstrued as, or somebody could interpret it as these are people that want to form an organization because they want to take over parts of the U.S. Because I think in somewhere in the Mecha statements, it's mentioned something about the people reclaiming their land. So that's what I thought would be maybe controversial, but it sounds to me like you're talking about a different type of controversy.
Well, I guess part of it is taking the Chicano away, and again, that's the term that my understanding is Mexican Americans, in particular people here in LA, uh, reappropriated, right? Chicano was a negative, and in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of the Mexican American, right? Somebody who was born here, maybe it's not Mexican, but they're Chicano, they're here, so they taking a term that previous generations saw it as a empowerment of the yes, I'm Chicano and I'm proud. So there's that. So I think changing the name, and part of it goes to the changing the name simply because it's misunderstood, similar to what National Council of La Raza this recently did. So you change it just because it has La Raza, and people just assume that it's a race
Mm-hmm.
thing versus educating yourself about what it actually means,
Right.
or third world center instead of educating yourself what it means. So, and part of it I understand because part of it is like, hey, this is our term. This is a term that many in our community were proud of, and we're proud to make it something that actually was recognized for the good that it was, as well as like, why are you making it easy on others just because they don't take the time to learn the meaning behind the names? Like, why do you want to make it easier for them, or less
Yeah.
offensive to them if they don't want to take the time to understand where we're coming from? And then the other piece is and it's interesting because I think the whole Aztlan connection, when you think about the Native American experience, and actually I saw this show the other day that talks about there's actually and then New Mexico, and then the southwest of the United States, there was an area where there were tribes from across the Americas came together.
Mm-hmm.
That was a sacred place. So I mean, part of it is political, kind of referring to the territory that was taken from Mexico. But and also there's some truth to it. There's a strong native connection. And it's so bad I can't remember the name, but it was a large city in New Mexico where they found fragments and articles from all across Mesoamerica and North America, where the native community came to learn and do their thing. So there's some truth to the concept of Aslan, and part of it has been passed down through generations. So at
Yeah, but
least that's
yeah, you can retain that. There's nothing wrong with having a connection to the indigenous past. The the you can get rid of the Chicano, but again, that's going to depend on what the objective of the group is. If I were running this group and I'm a longtime member of Mecha, I'm saying if I were to be one of those, if my objective was to try to empower my Latino community, to try to get as many members as possible so we can bring about significant change, then it's a marketing thing, right? So
Mhm.
I'm gonna try to brand the organization in a way that is more inclusive and that will attract Colombians, Latino, Salvadorians, Cubans, especially if I'm on campus or in any city. So in that regard, if your goal is to bring about significant change and to organize because there's strength in numbers, then it makes sense to get rid of the Chicano. They started out as Chicanos, but then it needs to evolve. And now because the Mexican Americans were predominantly the main ones here, but there needs to be an acknowledgement that we share a lot with other Latino cultures. So why not include them and just give up the Chicano term? It's still there. The Chicano's not going away, but the
Yeah, but
organization
why not?
evolves.
Well, the thing is, that term is enriched by a certain experience. So why not come up with a new term to be more inclusive versus, or a new organization, a new identity? So it's like saying, and I know this is a conversation that we have in here in the United States, but that's like saying that, oh, as a Colombian American, because I live in Colombia, I now live in the United States, and a lot of my culture, yes, at the base is Colombian, but I also have Mexican, Puerto Rican, Dominican, that I need to change my affiliation. Well, maybe I'm not saying that right, but I guess my point being that that there's an opportunity to perhaps create another term or create another consciousness, but not necessarily negating um, the root of that. So not necessarily negating my Colombianness, but
Mm.
saying, okay, I'm Colombian American, or I am a Latino, because that's how I feel. Because yes, uh, when people see me, I'm a Latino, and I care not just about Colombians. I care about Mexicans. I care about Puerto Ricans. I care what's happening with Venezuelans, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. So,
Um,
so you're saying
so
that, but you're saying that the term Chicano would still be replaced, but it would be replaced by a more inclusive word now, or are you saying that Mecha would still exist as we know it, but now a different group would be formed?
yeah, so like, and I know we had these conversations at Brown. It was always a challenge because that's when it comes to diversity, and I guess it goes the
No, but
the the,
sorry,
the
but
through line.
you
Huh?
said yes, but to which one though? To the just change the word or split the group?
Well, you keep the group, but then you sort of come up with an umbrella group or term that helps bring people together.
But isn't
So
that?
it's
But that sounds like a contradiction, though, because I'm trying to explain that if your goal is to bring people
mhm.
together, then you put nationalistic or any personal pride aside, and you do what's best for the group, not what's best for your identity. So I think at some point Mecha realized, and I'm not sure what the logic behind it is, but if it started out as Chicano, but a lot of people on college campuses, people that have risen through the ranks, are probably not may not be Mexican, because you have a lot of Central Americans and Caribbean people that join that organization. So naturally, if your group starts getting a lot of people from other areas, then it's only natural that the group evolves to incorporate them. Otherwise, you're just going to have a splinter. You're going to separate. You're going to have the hardcore people that want to associate with just Chicano, and then you're going to have everybody else that's inclusive. But that didn't achieve your objective. You managed to just splinter off the group and fragment it. If the objective is to bring everybody together, then just get rid of the word Chicano. Just have another one that still represents the same ideals, and then see if you can make it work out that way. At least that would be my theory on it. And I think the word Chicano, I used to embrace it when I was younger, but I didn't know anything about it. I just thought it was cool to say that I'm Chicano, because that differentiated me from people from Mexicans that came from Mexico but weren't born in the U.S. So I thought, hey, this is really cool to be part of like the Chicano group. It sounded cool.
Mm-hmm.
But then I got older and I got a little wiser. And then I realized, I found out that when people go to prison here in the U.S., there's two groups that Mexicans fall into. They fall into the Chicano group or the Paisas. So what are they doing? They're just separating themselves. And I thought to myself, like, why the hell are they separating themselves? Well, culturally, there is a huge difference between a Mexican American that considers themselves a Chicano versus somebody that just came from Mexico that's considered a Paisa. There's a huge difference, and they don't really get along in prison. But I always thought, like, man, like, both share a common heritage. Both have so many commonalities. They get into prison, and what's the first thing they do? They split themselves off instead of working together. So, to me, if Mecha wants to get rid of the Chicano word to include more people, to grow the organization, to make it more powerful so we can have more influence in terms of like college admissions, in terms of like a political bloc, then let's do it, let's get rid of it. It's my,
Okay.
it's my
No,
2 cents.
it's obviously is a legitimate perspective, and I think it's what probably the folks involved in this decision and ongoing dialogue on this have experienced. I think, but then you kind of thinking about the people who are proud and passionate about being Chicano, also they feel alienated, right? So now all of a sudden, the word or the way how they define themselves is not seen, is not validated in some
Mm-hmm.
way. But to your point, there's the realization that the group has become more diverse, and I think part of the conversation around the change has also been around the inclusion of LGBTQ populations,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that's sort of where we get into the conversation about Latinx. I guess they also were looking at it's Mestizo X, and then you have a lot of black um, machistas and others. So yeah, so it's um it's a dialogue that I think that happens a lot in college campuses, because obviously that's where people have more time and opportunity to be in the same space and have these types of conversations and try to get to a place where they, okay, let's do this to move forward outside of an organization, right? So I think it's part of how the next evolution of this debate. So it's fascinating to be
Yeah.
at this place now.
Yeah, I think that happens with any organization that starts getting people from other backgrounds. Like, look at this is something that maybe we can discuss later, but the Mormon community, the Mormon religion, originally started in Utah. It's expanding insanely fast, and not just in the Hispanic communities in the U.S., but also in Mexico. I think Mormonism is one of the fastest growing religions in Mexico.
Yeah, because they're
Eventually,
intentional about it.
I'm sorry.
They're intentional about it, right? They have missionaries.
Yeah,
Part of their
but
formation is going out, spend 2 years
yeah,
in.
I'm saying though, at some point, if the membership of Mexicans starts to get to considerable size within the Mormon population, within the Mormon religion, there's bound to be some changes that come about as a result of that. no different than any other religion when they start getting members from us, or a community. I mean, this is just like, it seems like it's natural evolution of groups, no matter where it is. You can think about a neighborhood where it's predominantly Mexican, and then a ton of Colombians start moving in. Well, at some point, what happens? The restaurants start becoming fusion, right? Mexican, Colombian, and then
Yeah.
if enough Colombians move in, it just becomes Colombian. And then there's always winners and losers to some degree. If you can think of like these the hardcore people that want to keep the word Chicano, they don't want to get rid of it. And yeah, they are the losers in this case, but it's really hard. You can't really please and come to a solution that satisfies every single party. There has to be some compromise, and at some point somebody has to say, yeah, there's losers and there's winners, and unfortunately somebody has to pick that. In this case, the members of that decided to make this decision with Mecha, they have to say, we're going to go in this direction because we think it's for whatever their goal is, right? You have to understand what the goal is
Hmm.
first, and then there'll be some winners and some losers. But just another comment on organizations like Mecha have a really difficult challenge when it comes to this, because if naturally, as Mecha grew out of specific communities, and then it started spreading into campuses outside of California, and then it started going across the U.S. Every single campus across the U.S. has a different diverse Latino population that wants to join it. So whereas here in California is predominantly Mexican American, at Brown University we ran into this ourselves, right? Because there was Mecha, predominantly again Mexican American Chicanos, but then there were a whole bunch of people like yourself that you thought, well, that seems like an organization that I might want to join. Can I join it? Can I not? Like, what are the, what is there any precedence for this, right? Remember, I mean, that's what you alluded to, that we had those conversations about was it at Brown that a lot of people felt like Mecha wasn't inclusive enough
Yeah.
towards you guys?
Well, it's not that it wasn't inclusive. It's not what I related to at the point, right? So I think maybe politically and ideologically, I was, oh, like Mecha is a place for me, but then culturally, an experience was the Latin American Student Organization was more of a home for me, right? And I could have potentially been active member of both, but then the reality is you have to choose, right? You have limited amount of time, and then you choose, okay, where do I want to channel my energy, and where's the place where I see my community, understanding that I form part of a broader community of Latinos students on campus and in the world, right? So I think that's the where it comes down to, right? So like where and I think a place at Brown, it like anywhere like life, right? I think what makes Brown unique is that for the most part, you everybody can find their own community. And I know a lot of the speeches, the commencement speeches, the speech that was given by the actor John, the guy from The Office, I can't remember his last name.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it was about that, right? He found his community and the community of stand up comedians that eventually helped him get to where his place was at. And one cool thing about the commencements this year was that the two student speakers, one of them was a Native American woman from Alaska, who
Mm-hmm.
was all talking about the African American and about Standing Rock and about and acknowledge sort of the native tribes and that part of Rhode Island and the territory where Brown is at. And then they had a Mexican Latina from, I believe she's from Laredo.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about the borders and talking about her experience as a Mexican American, somebody from those two worlds, and talking about borders and how the campus is a place of borders where we challenge ourselves to go beyond what we know and all those things. So it was neat to see that was part of the conversation at that level, and the fact that those experiences and voices got a platform
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of more people on campus can relate to, understanding that there's other people there who are probably just like, oh, what are they talking about? Like, I don't even know. And some, and or they probably mostly know because they've been kind of watching, seeing developments, reading the the B was it the BDH, and doing those things. So it's just it was interesting to also see that evolution.
The Brown Daily Herald, not the boycott divestment movement, which is BDS, right? You mean
Okay.
the Brown Daily Herald? That's what you meant, right?
Yes.
Yeah, which is the newspaper at Brown. And well, another thing that we haven't touched on, which is great that they had that they gave a podium to these speakers. But one of the other things that we haven't touched on is that in the 15 years since we graduated, or 19 years since we joined, social media has changed so much, and the
Oh
world
yeah.
is a lot smaller now as a result of it. So, which is a good thing because a lot of these experiences are being heard, and a lot of people are becoming aware of this, like the protesters at Standing Rock, the um, what's the other one? Like, what's happening at the border and so forth. A lot before it was, and you could still get access to it, but social media, Facebook, YouTube, it just makes it so that the amount of information that is there is at the click of your fingertips. Because before you may have watched a report on something and you thought it was interesting. Oh, okay, there's something going on at Standing Rock, but then you had to go and try to dig up material or try to get more information on it. But now if you want, you can just go to the rabbit hole on YouTube and you can get so much information right away. So a lot of people are able to educate themselves real time about these things.
Yeah. No,
Um,
and it's definitely changed. Well, it's interesting, right? Because people are more connected now, but at the same time, I feel people now also have more opportunity to just stay within the the spheres or the information sources that are more aligned with their own
yeah, our
thinking.
experiences. Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
our experiences are virtual now. You have a lot of social awkwardness now with a lot of people that are plugged in, but that they don't engage face to face as much as it used to be before. Um, I wanted to just comment briefly on Mecha, that I was part of Mecha at Brown, and I wanted to do community service and I wanted to help out. We didn't really do any of that. I remember that organization being meetings upon meetings to figure out to do stuff, and ultimately I stopped going to the meetings. I just said, man, I have to focus on my degree. I
Yeah.
had really important things to do. I could have taken more of a leadership role in structuring it and so forth, but my priority was to educate myself first of all, because I had a lot of catching up to do. So I think selfishly I focus on myself, and I always said I will give back to the community, but I can't. If Mecha, I feel it's a little disorganized, I can't devote hours of my time to try to organize it, because right now I need to focus on organizing myself. And my degree, which computer science, was pretty demanding, so I didn't have enough time to devote to that. But yeah, we didn't do much. I didn't. Maybe other people did, but I don't remember doing much there. A lot of gossiping and a lot of organizations and appointing different people, and then
Well, it was also hard too because it was always the same people trying to get and the same. I think that happened across student organizations, right? And again, people have not only school going on, some of them have work, some of them have other interests and things that they're dealing with, and it's hard for for people to stay engaged and stay committed, and also because of the way that it's structured, right? You do all this work during a semester, during a year, and then you have the summer break or you have that break, and you someone feels like you have to start over all over again.
yeah, just
So I know that's part of
yeah. I
the
remember.
dynamics that make it difficult.
Yeah, I remember there was. And this may have affected my perception of these groups, because in high school I was very involved, but I remember in college I ran into one of. It was she wasn't a good friend, but she lived in the same dorm that I lived in freshman year. And I remember talking to her once. It was freshman year, probably second semester, and it was around the time of finals. And she was really stressed out. And I remember asking her, like, "Hey, you look really stressed out. What's going on?" And she was like, "Oh my god, well, I need to study. I'm so backed up on my studies. And I asked her, well, so what's taking up all your time? Are you taking a really difficult class? And she was like, well, I'm part of this organization, and then we're doing this, and then I'm part of this other organization, and we're doing this something else. And I'm like, how many organizations are you part of? And she was like, three or four. And I was like, maybe you should just not be in so many organizations and focus on your actual schoolwork so that you can
Yeah.
graduate, because that should be your priority. So I think that left a mark on me. That left an impression. I thought, man, I'm not gonna make that mistake. Like, priority number one here is me. And then if there's extra time, if I feel like I can comfortably give time to organizations, then I will. But if I can, then that's gonna have to be deferred until a later time when I'm in a better position to do it.
No, no, that's a legitimate perspective. And I think the other perspective is obviously understanding, yeah, three organizations is too much. Let me just do one so I can focus on my studies, but still be able to advance the cause or the organization I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, yeah, that would have. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I tried joining. I think that I was expecting to find a structure that wasn't there, and I didn't feel like I had it in me to try to take on that leadership position. I think if now that Mecha, if they are rebranding, it's possible that in the future those two organizations, Lasso and Mecha, join. So now you have more people, because you're not fragmenting the Latino community, which is already small enough at Brown. You get them all under the same organization, and now you can have more people that are able to provide more structure to it.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Any other? Hey, we've been talking about this for a while. I know we kind of touched on a few things, and then we went off on a tangent. Anything else about the 15-year reunion that you want to talk about?
I think just you know, Brown is a great place because of the incredible rich academic environment there. The Even if you don't, because of the open curriculum, even if you don't design your own class or your own major, it ingrains in you this ownership of your education and your life, and the fact that you have a say in how and what you want to study, and how you um, plan your academic career there, or how you plan your career after your leave.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, there's a lot of the timeless traditions that we have. So, for instance, as you may remember, one of the best traditions for the commencement ends when the alumni walk through the gates, and you start with the oldest alums, the oldest reunion class. So you had people there who were in their 70th and 80th reunion. I mean, you only had one or two of them, and then you have every other class following them. So the administration and the alumni, the older alumni line up down College Hill right outside of the Van Wickle gates, and then the reunion classes start coming down, and then they start forming a line along the sides, and then the graduates come in through that line, and everybody's so excited about them, and everybody and all of the alumni are so excited as their other alumni come through, and obviously people go crazy for the older alums, and some of them just it's just recognizing the longevity, the love that they have for the institution, and for them to be able to come back even at their age to be part of the celebration. So then the students go back pass, and then the older alum go through the students. They call it like an inverted sock, and then the students get to show that love to the alumni who are on campus to celebrate them, and also to sort of reconnect with their friends in the institution. So that's one of the beautiful traditions that we do have at Brown, and that again is everybody coming together, uh, everybody who knows about the experience, and I think it just kind of highlights the reason why Brown is such a special place is really because of its people, right? The people the students who study there, the staff who support those students, the professors, the administrators, the people who work and the facilities, at the Ratty, at the V-Dub, the libraries, all those people who make Brown such a special place. So it was definitely um, feeling very grateful for the privilege of having gone there and having the opportunity to continue to keep my relationship with Brown as a Latino and as a Brown alum. I always say that I'm so Brown it hurts,
Yeah.
uh, and this time it hurt in a good way to be there.
That experience is definitely a powerful experience. We did that for the 5-year reunion and the 10-year reunion as well. It there's just so much that as you're experiencing that, as you're taking it in, there's you're not bored, you're not distracted, you're seeing what's happening, and you see the ones that graduated 80 years ago, and you look at them, you look at the makeup, you look at all of that, and as you see the line moving, it's just there's a lot of reflection, and there's a lot of like introspection, and a lot of there's so much that's going on in your mind. And I think that it's not necessarily overwhelming, but there's just so much that captures individuals, and I think that's why it's such a powerful experience to do that. Because of that, I'm hoping that in another 30 or 40 years, that's me and you right there, Los, and in our 80s, walking in with the
Yes,
cane. Yeah, that'd be nice.
it would be nice, and I think that's one of the cool things about you see how the classes have gotten more diverse through the years.
You can see that
And
that's what yeah, that's part of what why that's so powerful, because you see the gradual change. You see entire eras, right? Entire decades, that everything, there was a significant change in each decade.
so true. I wanted to play us off with a Brown fight song, but somehow my computer is acting up.
You just have to sing it, or is it instrumental?
So well, obviously we have the alma mater, which I can sing if I hear it. But then I think I like the university fight song just because it's, and we don't have much of sports culture. But
Yeah,
I do feel it's kind of like one of those traditions that is kind of, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, right? So it's a song that
yeah.
we um, that we recognize at the events and that people play. So it sounds old timey.
We'll leave it off at that. Thanks, Eduardo.